Welcome to the deep dive. Let's jump right in today because we're tackling a scenario that I know is going to feel a little too real.
Yeah, and honestly, a little too frustrating for a lot of you listening right now.
It really is. I mean, imagine you're pouring your absolute heart and soul into some incredibly important work.
Truly life-changing work.
Right. You're out there in the trenches, you're making a tangible difference in your community every single day.
But to keep the lights on and to keep that mission moving forward, you obviously need funding.
So you apply for grants, you
Ugh.
put everything you have into these narratives,
Yeah.
you hit submit, and then
Crickets.
right. You're met with just constant rejection.
Or maybe worse, just total silence.
It's a completely draining experience.
And the hard truth is, it's one that plays out every single day across the nonprofit sector.
Yeah, you have brilliant people
Yeah.
solving really complex problems, but they just can't seem to get the capital to scale their solutions.
Which brings us directly to the mission of today's deep dive.
Exactly. We are going to uncover the hidden disconnect between doing truly worthy work and actually getting paid to do it.
To get to the bottom of this, we're pulling from a really fascinating internal briefing document.
Yeah, it's written by Stephanie Willis. She's the founder and CEO of a system called fundready.
And her briefing outlines exactly why good organizations lose out on the grants they deserve.
And more importantly, how they can structurally change that outcome.
We're going to analyze her framework impartially, of course, just to understand the mechanics of why it works on a structural level.
But I'll give you a quick preview right now because her proposed solution is actually quite unexpected.
It really is. To solve this chronic funding problem, Willis suggests borrowing a massive structural secret.
Specifically from Fortune 500 companies and the medical field.
Right. It's an entirely different way of organizing your organizational knowledge.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the big tease right up front in Willis's briefing is that the reason for a grant rejection is almost never your mission.
Right. It's almost never your programs either.
It is something else entirely. The text paints a very raw picture of the emotional toll this takes on people.
It describes exhausted nonprofit leaders just endlessly revising their narratives.
Hiring super expensive grant writers, taking countless workshops.
And eventually just hitting a complete wall.
That emotional toll is heavy, and it leads to a really dangerous misdiagnosis of failure.
Because when you're doing work you deeply believe in and the funding is continually denied, it is so easy to internalize that rejection.
Imposter syndrome totally sets in. Leaders start to wonder if their mission is flawed or if their programs just aren't good enough.
But Willis explicitly argues that the root of the problem isn't the mission and isn't the people.
The root of the problem is their infrastructure.
Infrastructure. It sounds a bit clinical, right?
It does.
Yeah.
But to understand why infrastructure is the real culprit here, we have to flip the perspective completely.
We need to look at the psychology of the program officer.
The actual funder who is reading these grant applications on a random Tuesday afternoon.
This is a crucial pivot in how we think about this process.
Right, because a program officer isn't sitting there fundamentally misunderstanding the good work you're doing.
They're not confused about your passion.
No. What they're confused about is how to find the specific defensible information they need.
And they have to find it buried inside your 50-page application.
And they need to find it fast. They're operating under immense pressure.
Reviewing hundreds of applications, trying to find the exact data points and logical arguments to justify giving you a yes.
Because ultimately they have to confidently defend that yes to a very skeptical board of directors.
Willis lays out a very specific checklist of what that funder is frantically searching for.
There are 5 main pillars. Let's run through them. First is mission clarity.
Second is problem evidence.
Third is theory of change.
Fourth is program logic.
And fifth is budget justification.
Let's actually break those down a bit, because missing even one of these can entirely tank an application.
For sure. Mission clarity is pretty straightforward. Who are you and what is your ultimate goal?
Then problem evidence means you can't just rely on emotional appeals.
Right. You need hard data proving the problem exists in your specific community.
And then there's the theory of change, which I know is a major buzzword in the nonprofit space right now.
It is. For those who might not live and breathe grant terminology, a theory of change is essentially the roadmap of your impact.
It's the logical argument that proves if we do X, it will reliably lead to Y.
Exactly. It connects your daily activities to your ultimate long-term goals.
And that flows right into the fourth pillar, which is program logic.
That's the detailed step-by-step breakdown of how you actually execute those activities.
Finally, budget justification. The math absolutely has to align with the narrative.
Which brings up a great point. I've actually heard of this happening in the real world.
Oh yeah, it happens all the time.
You'll have an organization doing amazing work with, say, unhoused populations.
They write a beautifully poetic grant application.
But when the program officer looks at the budget, the numbers don't account for the overnight staff. The narrative just spent 3 pages talking about.
The timeline just doesn't match the requested funds.
So the funder has to say no. Not because the shelter isn't doing great work.
But because the proposal itself isn't defensible.
That is the real aha moment of this briefing. If those 5 elements are scattered,
Or if they're buried under a mountain of poetic storytelling.
or if they're just missing entirely, the proposal hits the no pile.
And it hits the no pile because the funder couldn't see the logic clearly enough to risk their own reputation defending it to their board.
So it's an infrastructure problem, not a writing problem.
You cannot just write your way out of a structural deficit with prettier words.
Which begs the question, if the problem is infrastructure, what is the structural solution?
Willis introduces a concept called a body of knowledge, or a BOK.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because if we connect this to the bigger picture, the concept of a body of knowledge is standard operating procedure in almost every other major professional field.
Think about the medical field. Doctors don't just guess or rely on their memory of a textbook from 10 years ago.
No, they operate from a massive, continuously updated, rigorously organized library of proven medical knowledge.
Project managers have a distinct BOK that dictates industry standards too.
And Fortune 500 companies spend millions building proprietary knowledge bases. So their marketing team and their product team and their finance team are all working from the exact same verified facts.
But nonprofits tragically almost never have one.
Wait, let me push back on this for a second. Isn't a body of knowledge for a nonprofit just a fancy corporate term for a shared Google Drive folder full of old grant applications?
It's a really common misconception, but there is a massive difference.
How so?
A shared Google Drive full of old applications is usually a graveyard.
Okay, that's fair.
It's a place where outdated information goes to hide, and it's full of contradictions depending on who wrote which grant in what year.
So a true body of knowledge is a single active interconnected library.
Exactly. It's a complete organized collection of what an organization knows, what it does, and what it can prove.
So according to the briefing, a real nonprofit BOK contains the mission, the history detailed descriptions of the programs, the theory of change, the raw community data, the budget logic, and the overall funding strategy.
All in one living document.
If a core metric changes, it updates the whole system, built once, used everywhere, and updated as the organization evolves.
What's fascinating here is the shift in operational mechanics.
Yeah, think about the standard nonprofit workflow when a grant opportunity pops up.
The leader or the grant writer starts staring at a blank page.
They pull a little from a 2023 application, they write some new paragraphs,
They try to remember a statistic from a recent board meeting.
and they reinvent the wheel every single time. It is exhausting.
But when an organization possesses a verified body of knowledge, that entire process flips.
You go from starting from scratch
Okay.
to simply pulling from a proven, pre-vetted system.
You're just extracting the precise answers the funder is already looking for.
Willis's text is very explicit about the impact of this shift. It argues that this isn't just a marginal time saver.
It is transformational.
You aren't just saving a few hours of typing. You are entirely changing how your organization interfaces with capital.
It changes your baseline stance. You move from a posture of pleading for funds, hoping someone takes pity on your hard work,
To a posture of presenting a highly organized, deeply defensible investment opportunity.
it changes the power dynamic completely.
But knowing you need a Fortune 500 level body of knowledge and actually having the capacity to build one are two very different things.
And that brings us to why Willis built the fundready system in the first place.
She saw organizations with incredible life-saving missions getting passed over simply because funders couldn't see the brilliance through the messy infrastructure.
And historically, building that level of professional-grade infrastructure has a brutally high barrier to entry.
Usually it's a privilege reserved for organizations that are already well-funded.
You need to be able to afford high-end consultants who charge $50,000.
Or you need a full-time development director.
Or you have to win a massive capacity-building grant just to afford the time to get organized.
It creates a brutal catch-22 for grassroots organizations. You need funding to build the infrastructure, but you need the infrastructure to get the funding.
So Willis designed fundready specifically to disrupt that catch-22.
And the core tool she introduces to solve this is something called a field manual.
Now, the briefing makes a huge point of clarifying what this is and, more importantly, what it isn't.
Right. It insists this is not a worksheet. It is not a printable handout from a weekend seminar.
The terminology here is very intentional. A field manual is tactical.
It's something you take into the trenches with you to solve immediate operational problems.
The framework outlines that this manual is designed so that an organization at any level with any size budget can use it to systematically extract their own knowledge and build their BOK section by section.
And the engine powering this manual is where it gets incredibly modern. The system utilizes artificial intelligence.
But we need to be clear on how it's used, because a lot of people hear AI grant writing and they instantly think of a chatbot.
Right. Spitting out generic, soulless paragraphs that sound like a robot wrote them.
And funders can spot those AI-generated grants from a mile away.
The FundReady framework uses AI very differently. It uses AI as the structural engine, but it relies entirely on the organization's own lived experience as the fuel.
AI cannot invent your community relationships.
It doesn't know the historical context of your neighborhood.
And it certainly can't invent the specific programmatic impacts your team has achieved.
The field manual bridges that gap. It gives the nonprofit leader a structured, step-by-step way to extract their own deep expertise and feed it into the AI engine.
The AI then handles the heavy lifting of structuring, organizing, and formatting that expertise into the required sections of the body of knowledge.
I really love how this democratizes access to high-level organizational structure.
For anyone listening, you don't need a massive consulting budget to achieve an organized, defensible logic model anymore.
The manual provides the framework, you provide the authentic knowledge. And the AI organizes it into the exact formats that program officers are desperately looking for.
Okay, but let's play devil's advocate for a second.
Yeah.
If you drop a comprehensive field manual and an AI tool onto the desk of a nonprofit leader who is already working 60 hours a week running programs, aren't they just going to put it on a shelf next to all the other workshop binders they've collected over the years?
That is the exact trap of professional development in this sector: information overload.
And Willis addresses this directly in the briefing.
This is why FundReady isn't just a single tool or a one-off class. It's designed as a complete capacity-building ecosystem.
The structural genius here is how it manages cognitive load. It scales the infrastructure precisely alongside the organization's capacity to absorb it.
Let's actually look at those tiers, because the pacing of how they introduce this structure is fascinating.
It all starts with the entry point, which the text calls the AI BOK workshop.
This is a live 2-hour session with Stephanie. And the goal isn't just to sit back and listen to a lecture about why infrastructure is nice to have.
The goal is immediate execution. The briefing notes that participants use the field manual to build the initial foundation of their body of knowledge in real time.
Right, during those 2 hours. They walk in with scattered information, and they leave with a tangible, foundational document.
It's about getting a quick structural win to prove the concept works.
Once that foundation is set, the ecosystem offers an expansion phase for organizations ready to push further.
They call this the 28-day grant readiness sprint.
This takes that foundational BOK and expands it from 9 sections to a full 18 sections.
But it's not just about adding page count. This 28-day sprint is where the logic is heavily pressure tested.
Remember those 5 pillars the funders are looking for. This is where the organization stress tests their theory of change.
They refine their language, they tighten their programmatic logic.
And crucially, they build out the concrete evidence to back up their claims.
They're moving from a basic outline to a rigorously defensible library of proof.
After you have that massive comprehensive library, built out the system pivots again into a phase called the Core 4 Intensive.
And this is all about laser focus. Because when you're actually applying for a grant, you aren't sending the funder your entire body of knowledge.
Exactly. You're sending them specific tactical documents.
The Core 4 Intensive zeroes in on the top 4 specific documents that funders actually demand to see in about 90% of applications.
It takes that broad knowledge base and translates it into the sharpest, most effective tactical tools possible.
It's about taking the theory and making it highly deployable.
And finally, the text outlines the ultimate level of this ecosystem, the 12-week accelerator.
While the earlier sprints might focus heavily on the executive director or a solo grant writer, this 12-week program is designed for full organizational transformation.
It embeds the body of knowledge philosophy into the culture and the daily operations of the entire team.
This raises an important question. Why is this multi-step approach necessary?
Well, it's entirely about preventing burnout.
Because every single level uses the exact same core field manual framework, the system scales naturally.
The 2-hour workshop builds the foundation using the manual. The 28-day sprint expands it using the exact same manual.
You're never throwing away the previous work or learning a totally new system.
The operational maturity of the nonprofit increases steadily without overwhelming the very people trying to run the programs.
So what does this all mean?
When we step back and look at all these moving parts, the emotionally exhausted leaders,
The program officers desperate for defensible logic.
the concept of a body of knowledge, the AI-powered field manual, and this highly structured, tiered ecosystem.
The central synthesis is this. Good, vital nonprofits are failing to secure funding every day, but they are not failing because their missions are weak or their community work is ineffective.
They are failing because their organizational information is scattered, making their proposals structurally indefensible to funders.
Fundready, through Stephanie Willis's framework, offers a scalable path to fix that exact problem.
By using a specialized field manual, leveraging AI as an organizational engine, and moving through targeted capacity-aware sprints, any organization can build a comprehensive body of knowledge.
And that body of knowledge is the precise infrastructure required to make a funder confidently say yes.
It's a fundamental shift from hoping you get funded to structurally proving you deserve to be funded.
Now, the briefing does end with a specific call to action, which we're happy to relay impartially.
Willis notes that for listeners ready to build this system, the entry point for that initial workshop is over at fundready.io.
But regardless of whether you use her specific tool or build the infrastructure yourself, the core philosophy remains critical.
As the text beautifully points out, if you are doing the work you already know your organization deserves to be funded, you don't need to be convinced of your own worth.
You simply need a system that clearly shows funders what you already know to be true.
I think that's a perfect encapsulation of the structural challenge nonprofits face.
But before we wrap up today's deep dive, I want to leave you with a final, lingering thought to mull over.
I love these. Let's hear it.
We spent this entire conversation talking about organizational structure, grant funding, and nonprofit dynamics. But I want you to apply this concept to your own life.
Oh, interesting.
Think about your own career trajectory, your personal brand, or those side projects you're so passionate about.
Yeah?
How many resources, promotions, or life-changing opportunities are passing you by simply because your personal body of knowledge is scattered across old resumes, forgotten project files, and unarticulated ideas in your head?
Wow.
What would happen if you took the time to structure your own expertise and your own evidence of impact so clearly and logically that the world had absolutely no choice but to say yes to you?
What an incredible question to leave off on. Building a personal body of knowledge. I absolutely love that concept.
It really changes how you look at your own value.
It does. Well, that brings us to the end of our exploration today. Thank you so much for joining us and spending your time with us on the deep dive.
Keep questioning the structures around you. Keep organizing your brilliance.
And, as always, stay curious.